Hello and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT video. Today we'll be covering the 13 origins of set 5. Consider this a bit of an introduction to the set for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to check it out on the PBE. We'll also be doing another video soon after covering the 14 classes of set 5. Keep in mind that since set 5 is on the PBE, most of the specific numbers will be changing, so we'll try to leave them out when possible. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's go ahead and dive on in. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's jump back to the video. Starting off, let's talk about the origin Abomination. As we said, we'll try to stay away from providing specific numbers in regards to the origins because they're being changed very often on the PBE. Anyway, Abomination is a 2, 3, 4, and 5-piece trait. When 3 allied champions have died, a monstrosity rises up from a gravestone that is placed in the corner of a player's board. The monstrosity receives bonus attack damage and health, which is based on allied Abomination champion star levels. Basically, think of Cultist from set 4 or the Mech from set 3. The monstrosity is similar to both of those. The last thing about monstrosity is that 3 Abomination champions nearest to the grave will give the monstrosity one random copy of an item they hold. There are only 4 Abomination champions, so in order to hit 5 of the trait, you need a spatula item. For Abomination, this requires spatula plus a shadow glove. As for champions, they're Callista, Brand, Nunu, and Rise. It's fairly easy to have an Abomination early on in the game, as you really only need Callista and Brand to activate it early. It's also easy enough to splash in Abomination later on in the game, though the monstrosity really won't be that strong at the lower tiers once you're in the later stages of the game. Abomination is not the first summon type trait we've seen, but it has unique properties with the way it's summoned, and the way it scales is slightly different from similar traits in previous sets. Let's move on and talk about the next origin, Coven. Coven is a 3-piece trait with only 3 champions. Those are Lysandra, LeBlanc, and Morgana. Once you have all 3 Coven champions, they can give a buff known as the Coven Leader to one champion nearest the center of your Coven units. This can be any champion as long as they're in the middle of the Coven. If you don't place any in between them, then one of the Coven champions will be turned into the Coven Leader. The benefit of making a champion into a Coven Leader is that they gain bonus ability power, and each time a Coven champion casts, the leader gains mana based on a percentage of the cost of the ability. This can be great for magic damage focused champions with a high mana pool, so their ability happens earlier on in a fight. It can be useful for champions with a small mana pool too to help them cast more often, but it's really not the same value. Overall, Coven is interesting because of positioning. Trying to maneuver your board in a way that you can safely turn a champion into the Coven Leader without sacrificing good positioning is going to make this origin hard to use effectively. We may end up seeing it more as an early to mid-game focus trait since the Coven champions are all low cost, though you can turn any champion into a Coven unit with a spatula plus a shadow tier. Next up is Dawnbringer. Dawnbringer is an 8-piece origin that starts at 2, then 4, 6, and finally 8. This makes it easy to activate by only requiring 2 champions. There's only 7 Dawnbringer champions, so if you want to hit 8, you'll need a spatula and a normal belt. The Dawnbringer champions are Gragas, Kha'Zix, Soraka, Nidalee, Riven, Karma, and finally one of the 2 God Kings, Garen. The way this origin works is relatively simple. When a Dawnbringer champion dips below a certain amount of health, they then rapidly heal based on a percent of their maximum health. This can only occur once, and when it does happen, every Dawnbringer champion also gains bonus damage. The amount healed scales with the trait, while the bonus damage remains the same at every tier. Dawnbringer champions can be quite difficult to kill early on in the game, making champions like Gragas and Kha'Zix highly valued for winning early rounds. Later on, the healing can fall off because of items that have healing reduction, but the taller you go with the trait, the more those champions heal, which can often offset the healing reduction. All in all, the trait has a lot of potential with 7 champions, multiple carries, and of course the God King Garen himself for the late game. Moving on, let's talk about the next origin, Draconic. Draconic is the fortune-like trait of set 5. At the end of each combat against another player, an egg will pop up on the player's bench. The eggs will then hatch after a certain number of rounds. The amount of rounds required goes up depending on the egg size, which can be small, medium, or large. Once the egg hatches, you gain a loot orb on the board to pick up, which provides various rewards, with larger eggs providing more than smaller. The baseline trait requires 3 champions, while the upper tier requires 5. If you have all 5, then the eggs turn golden and provide even rarer loot. The unique thing about Draconic is that you don't have to lose rounds or even kill units or do anything special besides having Draconic champions on your board. All you have to do is wait a few rounds to gain value from the trait, which is a healthy mechanic compared to the volatility of Fortune from set 4. There are 5 Draconic champions, which are Udyr, Set, Ashe, Zyra, and Heimerdinger. It's relatively easy to get the trait active early game as the champions range from 1 cost to 3. But to hit 5, it's much harder as Heimerdinger is a 5 cost unit, meaning 5 Draconic is unlikely to happen in most games. Nonetheless, it's a great trait to have active during the early stages of the game. Up next is DRAGONSLAYER. DRAGONSLAYER is a 2 and 4 piece trait with the champions Trundle, Pantheon, Diana, and Mordekaiser. The origin can be given to another champion with a spatula and a shadow rod. When you have the trait active, it will provide bonus ability power to Dragonslayers as a baseline effect. Once the first Dragonslayer earns a takedown against an enemy with a certain amount of health, 1400 at the moment, then all allies gain additional ability power for the rest of the round. The origin is quite interesting as you don't have to do the second part to gain value. Baseline, your Dragonslayer champions will gain bonus ability power, so you're not being punished for meeting the specific criteria. The major downside for Dragonslayer is how expensive it can be with both Diana and Mordekaiser being 4 cost champions, so hitting 4 Dragonslayer can be difficult. Overall, it's a simple trait with an interesting twist. Next is our first champion-specific origin, Eternal. Eternal is the solo trait for the 5 cost champion Kindred. What the trait does is separate Wolf from Lamb, meaning once you put Kindred on your board, you'll gain an additional unit. Wolf won't count against your board limit and receives all the bonus stats that Kindred gains, whether from traits or other items. The Wolf unit also has its own ability and mana that is separate from Kindred. Eternal is a lot like Azir from set 4, except it takes the idea a step further, with Wolf being an actual unit that can do damage and gain stats. It does mean Kindred has a lot of value over most other 5 cost units because you're gaining 2 units for 1, so expect Kindred to be a common late game champion. Moving along, we have Forgotten. Forgotten is a 3, 6, and 9 piece trait you can hit naturally or with a spatula plus a shadow sword. The champions are Warwick, Vayne, Hecarim, Thresh, Victor, Katarina, Draven, Ryze, and Viego. Those champions span across all tiers, with some being frontline, damage dealers, and utility. Forgotten is one of the more unique origins as it's tied directly to the shadow item system. Inherently, Forgotten units gain bonus attack damage and ability power, but that is increased by a % bonus based on the number of shadow items held by your Forgotten champions. There is a limit to how many times it can stack, but basically having shadow items with Forgotten is going to increase their value. It's unique and incentivizes players to try out the new shadow item system. Up next, we have Hellion. Hellion is a 3, 5, and 7 piece trait that requires a spatula plus a shadow bow to hit 7, as there's only 6 Hellion champions baseline. Those are Kled, Poppy, Ziggs, Kennen, Lulu, and Teemo. Hellion champions gain bonus attack speed baseline, but the unique aspect of this origin is when a Hellion champion dies, a copy of them at 1 star or lower will leap into the fight. For example, if you have a 3-star Kled and he dies, a 2-star Kled will then pop out of a portal near the edge of your board and continue to fight. This is definitely stronger early on in the game when more units on the board often equates to winning. But if you can get multiple 3-star Hellion champions, which is absolutely doable because most of them are low cost, then you can have a relatively strong mid and late game board. The next origin is Ironclad. Ironclad is quite simple, being a 2 and 3 piece trait that provides armor to all allies. The champions are Nautilus, Jax, and Rel. You can also turn a champion into an Ironclad with a spatula plus a chain vest. Honestly, there's really not that much to talk about with Ironclad. It's really just that simple of a trait. Splash in the champions, gain armor, that's it. Let's now move on to Nightbringer. Nightbringer is a 2, 4, 6, and 8 piece origin with 8 total champions. Those champions are Vladimir, Sejuani, Lee Sin, Morgana, Yasuo, Aphelios, Diana, and the God King Darius. You can also turn any champion into a Nightbringer with a spatula plus shadow belt. When active, the Nightbringer champions gain a shield equal to a % of their maximum health the first time they drop below 50%. Once this occurs, the Nightbringer champion also gains bonus damage. The shield and damage scale the more you have of the trait. Overall, this origin has a wide range of champions it can use for frontline, utility, or as carries. The shield is deceptively good at keeping champions alive and also benefits from longer fights so that more of the units proc the shield and therefore gain bonus damage. Next, we have Redeemed. Redeemed is a 3, 6, and 9 piece origin with 8 champions. Those are Aatrox, Leona, Syndra, Varus, Lux, Rel, Vel'Koz, and Kayle. Since there's only 8 units, you will need a spatula plus a cloak to hit 9 Redeemed. Redeemed is a lot like Dragon Soul and Darkstar from previous sets, as each redeemed unit has increased stats, and when they die, those stats are split among the remaining redeemed units. The unique aspect of Redeemed compared to the traits with a similar design from previous sets is that every redeemed unit starts out with increased stats. The stats being split just serves to make those units slightly stronger, as opposed to traits like Darkstar, where the bonus stats only occurred upon a unit dying. This means you're not punished for keeping your board alive longer, instead of having to position around sacrificing specific units to gain bonus stats. The second to last origin is Revenant. Revenant is a 2 and 3 piece origin with only 3 champions, those being Nocturne, Ivern, and Volibear. Despite being a small origin, there is a spatula item for it which requires a Shadow Cloak. Revenant is easy to understand, as the Revenant champions revive once after their first death during combat. The caveat being they take and deal increased damage when they revive to help differentiate the origin from the revive effect of Guardian Angel. The amount of health they revive with is increased when you go from 2 to 3 of the trait. As we said, it's a simple trait to understand. Revenant unit dies, it comes back. It can stack with Guardian Angel, so a Revenant champion can die, revive, and do that again if you have the trait active with a Guardian Angel. And the last origin of set 5 is Verdant. Verdant is another simple origin that activates at 2 and 3. When active, the trait provides crowd control immunity to any ally at the start of combat that is adjacent to the Verdant champion. Those champions are Ashe, Taric, and Kayle. There's not a whole lot to cover here, as the idea behind Verdant is very simple. It's another trait that acts similarly to how an existing item functions, the item in this case being Quicksilver. Potentially, we may see Verdant being valued highly as players get more and more used to set 5, since crowd control immunity to multiple champions is quite strong. That said, it really hasn't felt all that necessary so far in the PvE, mainly due to the fact that there's been less overall crowd control in set 5 compared to set 4. But we'll have to wait and see how the meta evolves once set 5 is fully released and players get a better grasp at using the new set. That's going to be it for today's video, folks. Teamfight Tactics has come a long way since set 1, and we're seeing that in how uniquely they've designed some of the origins in set 5. At the same time, they also know when to scale it back with simpler traits like Ironclad and Verdant. We'll be back soon with another set 5 video to cover the classes of set 5. Let us know in the comment section below which origin you like the most from set 5. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.